Welcome to Neo Royal House of Pricey Cardboard. I present to you the second and last episode with Zendikar's Rising Commander Precons. I will describe more quickly the deck, so I suggest you watch our last episode if you missed it to get the full details. Both games are very different, I reassure you. This episode, as all our content, is brought to you by our amazing Patreons. If you would like to support the channel, you can look at the link in the description. You can also help us for free by being subscribed and sharing the channel with your playgroup. I will be playing Obuun, Muldaya Ancestor. This is a Naya landfall deck that cares about +1/+1 counters and land creatures. Katie will be playing Anowon, the Ruined Thief. This is a rogue tribal deck with a sub-team on mill and reanimation. Our opening hand contains Slitherblade, Marsh Slither, Extract from Darkness, Open into Wonder, Dimir Aqueduct, a basic swamp, and a basic island. Pretty good hand. While lacking some RAM, she basically has 4 lands in hand with the bounce land, 2 rogues to play before Anowon, and a really good draw with Open into Wonder to refill once everything is played. My opening hand contains Sporer Mound, Banishing Light, Satyr Wayfinder, Rites of Flourishing, Evolving Wilds, and a Gruul Turf. It's an okay hand. The bounce land kind of gives me my 3rd land in a hand, and the Satyr will hopefully draw me one as well. I have a draw engine in Rites of Flourishing and a removal for any non-land permanent with Banishing Light. Kelly gets to start the match. She land drops an island and casts Slitherblade. If my Yuriko deck taught me anything, is that unblockable 1/1s are pretty good. I land drop an Evolving Wild and crack it for basic plains. Kelly land drops Jwar Al Refuge, gaining a life. She goes to combat and attack me with Slitherblade. I land drop a Gruul Turf, bouncing my plains to hand. Starting at 6 cards allows me to not discard to end size. Big plays. Inspired by my big play, Kelly land drops a Dimir Aqueducts, bouncing the island to her hand. She head into combat and sends Slitherblade again. I land drop a plains and cast Rites of Flourishing. I then land drop a Crescent Verge tapped as my 2nd land for turn. Katie draws 2 cards at the start of her turn. She land drops a Swamp and a Dimir Guildgate. She then casts her commander, Anowon the Ruined Thief. Going into combat, Slitherblade deals me 2 damage. Anowon triggers and mills me 2. My mill includes a creature and Kelly draws a card. At her cleanup step, Kelly discards a swamp to end size. I cast a Kodoma's Reach, searching my library for 2 basic forests. I put one on the battlefield tap and land drop the other. I then cast Satyr Wayfinder. Entering the battlefield, I reveal a mountain from my top 4. I put it to my hand. I land drop it for turn as my 2nd land drop. Kelly land drops 2 islands, keeping up with my land deck, which is pretty bad for me. Ending into combat, she attacks me with Slitherblade and Anowon. I block with my Satyr. I mill 2 mountains and Kelly does not draw. In 2nd main, she casts Stink Drinker Bandit for its prowl cost. She follow it up with Marsh Slither. Entering the battlefield, she creates 2 goblin, but more importantly, rogue tokens. She passes. I finally cast my commander, Obuun, Muldaya Ancestor. I then drop a plains and put a +1/+1 counter on my commander. I then cast Banishing Light, targeting Anowon. Katie puts him in the command zone. I then drop a forest as my 2nd land for turn and put another counter on Obuun. I go to combat. Obuun turns my forest into a 5/5 land creature with Ace and Trample until end of turn. I send the land to Katie. Katie then drops a swamp and an island. She casts Frog Tosser Banneret. She then recasts her commander. For her combat, she attacks with Slitherblade and Marsh Slither. The Stink Drinker Bandit gives them +2/+1 as they are unblocked, dealing me 8 damage. I mill 8 cards, including a creature, and she draws a card. Falling behind every turn because of my own card, I cast Inspiring Call to draw a card. I then drop Blighted Woodland, putting a +1/+1 counter on my commander. I follow it up with Core Cartographer. A nice reprint, but pretty bad in a green deck, especially one without multi-type lands. Entering the battlefield, I search my library for a plains and I shortcut by sacrificing my Crescent Verge at the same time for a plains and a forest. This gives me 3 landfall triggers to add 3 +1/+1 counter on Obuun. I do not have any untapped land to send in Kelly's direction and pass. Kelly land drops a swamp and an island. She goes to combat, attacking with Slither Blade and Marsh Flitter. The Sting Drinker Bandit gives them +2/+1 again. I mill 8 cards, including a creature. She passes. I untap and go straight to combat. Obuun turns my Blighted Woodland into a 9/9 trample land creature. I send Obuun, the land, and the core to Kelly. She reacts with Aetherize, returning my attacking creatures to hand. I then cast Arcane Signet to gain the 10th non-land permanent on the battlefield, and pay 3 white mana for Hour of Revelation, resetting the table. I then cast Trove Warden and then drop a basic forest. Its landfall trigger exiles my Evolution Sage under it. If my Trove Warden would die, I would put all the cards exiled under it on my battlefield. At my end step, Kelly flashes in a Fairy Vandal, and then flash in an Ocean Thief. I'm very happy that I destroyed my own Rites of Flourishing. She untaps and casts Extract from Darkness. We mill 2 and she brings back Anowon from her graveyard. Heading into combat, she sends the Fairy Vandal. I mill 2 with no creature. For my turn, I recast Obuun. I then cast Spore Mound. I land drop a Blighted Woodland, and I exile a Banishing Light under the cat, putting a +1/+1 on my commander. I also create a Sapling from Spore Mound. I recast Core Cartographer and get the same 3 landfall triggers, except I put the +1/+1 counter on the Trove Warden and exile a mountain from my graveyard. For my combat, I attack with my Vigilant Trove Warden. Kitty casts Arcane Signet. She then casts Ogre Slumlord. Going into combat, Fairy Vandal head my way. I mill 2, including a creature. The Fairy gains a +1/+1 counter since Kelly drew her second card this turn. She then land drops a swamp and pass. I cast Living Twister. I land drop a Burrow's Garrison, returning a land to hand. I add a counter on Obuun, exile a land under my cat, and create a Sapling. I go to combat. Obuun makes my forest into a 5/5 trample ace creature. I send a big chunk of my creatures to Kelly. She reacts by casting Price of Fame on Obuun. Ogre Slumlord triggers and creates a rat that has Death Touch. She blocks with the rat, Anowon, and Ogre taking 5. Ogre Slumlord triggers again, creating 2 more rats. Considering I have to swing with my lands, this is very problematic for me. Kelly casts Master Thief. I have no artifact for her to steal. She then casts Open into Wonder, where X equals 3. Going to combat, she sends the unblockable Notion Thief, Ogre Slumlord, and Anowon, plus the Flying Fairy Vandal. I milled 13, including a creature. She draws from Anowon and 3 more from Open into Wonder. She could have taken me out by paying a bit more into the X. Let's see if we can come back from this. In second main phase, she casts Latchkey Fairy for its Prowl cost, drawing a card on ETB. She then land drops an island. At Kelly's end step, I crack my Blighted Woodland, fetching a forest and a plains to my battlefield. I exile 2 lands under my Trove Warden and create 2 more Saplings. I then untap. I cast Obuun once more. I then cast Retreat to Kanzandu. I land drop a forest, putting 2 +1/+1 counters on Obuun. I exile a land under my cat and create a Sapling. I use the Living Twister to bounce a tapped land to my hand. I then pay 2 to discard a land to deal 2 damage to a rat. I repeat the process to deal 2 to a second rat. One last time, I go to combat. Obuun triggers and turn my plains into a 5/5. I send Living Twister, the plains, the 4 Saplings, and Spore Mound for 18. Kelly does not block. She untaps and goes straight to combat, sending Fairy Vandal and Latchkey Fairy to end my whole career. Looking back at this game, you shouldn't really play with Rites of Flourishing in my opinion. The fact that you can fall behind in a 1v1 situation says a lot about what would happen if 3 of your opponents drew 2 and land dropped twice. Unless you just want to speed up games, then yes, it can work. Another card that feels not very effective is the Trove Warden in a matchup where you can't block to kill it. I'm sure it's gonna shine more in regular games. Even with a board wipe, Kelly's deck was able to rebuild a board and start attacking with hard to block creatures. The commander is really interesting, and honestly, even in multiplayer, the mill potential is very good. Kitty has decided to upgrade the deck into a more tuned up list, removing some of the bulk reanimation spell for additional mill power, some missing rogues, and other synergies. The list will be in the description if you want to give it a look. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. We will be back next week with a regular game of 4-player EDH, so make sure to subscribe and join us in the house of Pricey Cardboard. Take care and be kind to each other.
Breaking news! Ronald McDonald's secret lair with never printed before format staples! Woo!